Because I'm more of an optimist, I tend to think of it more as a challenge. And that challenge is to enhance our cognition, a grand challenge. And I don't mean the amount of information we have or knowledge. I mean like the core of what makes us human, how we perceive, how we think and feel, and then how we act, that cycle. And it's a critical challenge because if we don't address this, if we don't think at a higher level, we'll never deal with the other important challenges like climate change, which demands like long time delayed thinking and very high level decision making and empathy for other people that will be affected even if it's not yourself. And it's a global challenge and a pervasive one. So enhancing cognition in young minds, developing minds, should be the purview of education. And then maintaining it through our entire lives would be what wellness should do. And then, of course, when we have deficits in cognition, it should be the domain of mental health and medicine. And so how are we doing in terms of improving these core abilities of the mind? Our attention, our perception, our memory, decision-making, emotional regulation, and at the very highest level, things like empathy, compassion, love, wisdom. I would say we are tragically lacking in optimizing those abilities. I'm just going to focus on the medical side since we have such a short time together today and talk about why I think that we are having such difficulties in enhancing cognition when people have deficits in them. The first problem is that we use very poor assessments. So the advances that have taken place in cognitive neuroscience, which we use at our laboratories, functional brain imaging, has not really made its way into the clinical domain. If someone presents to their doctor with a change in their attention or their memory, we're unlikely to know what's actually going on inside their brain that brings them in there that day. That, of course, doesn't prevent us from treating. And the problem is that we have really relied on small molecules that don't have the targeting that we're looking for, right? And I don't have to, tell this audience the frustration that we've had with that, right? We target neurotransmitter systems, but not the underlying computational unit of the brain, which is the neural network. Therefore, we have to increase our doses to very high levels to get the effects we want, and we always get pretty much just as many side effects as we do effects. So there's nothing inherently wrong with this concept of using a molecule to boost our cognition. We just have not had any major win, largely because of our targeting problems. The other is that we have a really non-personalized system. Us physicians make our prescriptive advice based on large population study that ignores all the individual differences of the brains in those studies. Some practitioners, not the best, treat this as a holy grail, right, in a siloed unimodal fashion, that one molecule could correct something as complex as depression in the human brain. But the biggest problem is that this is an incredibly open loop system. We take a drug, we go home, we monitor our effects subjectively and the side effects, we go back to our doctor, months could pass, and then a decision is made to go up or down 5 milligrams, right? The art of medicine. And let's say this is just not good enough, right? This is not where we should be. These are not the details of the system. These are the fundamental basis of how we would proceed with enhancing our cognition. And so we at least need another system working in parallel that's targeted, personalized, multimodal, and closed loop. How do we build such a system? So I grew up on the East Coast, but I now live in San Francisco, been out there for 15 years, and we at least maintain the possibility that technology can do everything, right? And we know this is sort of absurd in a way, but it's worth thinking about, can technology be used as a tool to have those, to overcome those hurdles and to allow us to enhance our cognition and address this cognition crisis that I feel we're facing. So I want to tell you about how we're going about doing that. First, it's worth pausing and noting, and you heard I wrote a book that came out last year called The Distracted Mind, Ancient Brains in a High-Tech World, talking about the challenges of technology on our brains, right? We have evolved in a certain way where we have these strengths of these very high-level goal-setting abilities, but yet we have retained fundamental limitations in our cognitive control, our attention, our working memory, our ability to multitask. And we have a collision between essentially what we want to do and what we're capable of doing that creates the interference of the distracted mind. And so it's worth framing where we are in the moment with technology and the challenge it creates if we look forward. And I think that this is a key time to do this. A friend of mine, Jon Favreau, a Hollywood guy, producer, actor, director, most recently did Jungle Book and is now doing Lion King. We did an onstage presentation on virtual reality and storytelling. And he says, I want to find the humanity in the technology. And I feel like this is the key moment right now and will be a pivot point, I believe, when we look back in the past from a decade in the future, that this was the time that we started thinking, when we create new technology, does this have the potential to enhance what makes us human, or does it degrade us? And that really has not been part of the pipeline, and I think it should be, and I think that that's starting to happen. And it's such a critical time for that to happen, because we have the consumerization of virtual reality, augmented reality, motion capture, wearable physiological devices, and artificial intelligence and other machine learning algorithms. Most of this technology is being positioned in the consumer space for entertainment, media, and communication, and that is great. But there is the potential, an opportunity here to use this technology as well as the technology that we already have as tools to enhance our cognition. Now, of course, the devil's in the details about how we go about that, but at the highest level, it's not so complicated, because all of this technology can be used to create very powerful, targeted experiences, and as we know, experiences really drive our brain's plasticity. It's not the only force that drives plasticity. Injury drives plasticity through compensatory responses, but this is the entire basis of learning, a non-contentious point amongst neuroscientists. We know how strong this relationship is. Even witnessing a single tragic event could detrimentally impact the function of your brain for the rest of your life. Right? We call that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so the opportunity is, can we create new technologies or leverage the existing technologies to build targeted experiences that maximally harness the brain's plasticity to enhance our cognition, refine our behavior, and ultimately to elevate our minds, our collective minds as a species. If we don't do that, technology will continue to place the pressure it has on us and will never address all the other grand challenges that we face. But not all experiences are created equal, just like not foods that you eat are equal, or exercise that you might do for your physical body. And so what type of experiences are we talking about to have this potential? I think the answer is really in the closed loop system. A closed loop is where you intervene in some way and record the outcome. So you quantify the impact with as low latency as possible, ideally in real time. You then use that data to refine your intervention. If what you're doing was too much, you pull back. If it was too little, you push more. You apply, you record, you refine, and you apply again, cycling over and over at each pass, becoming more targeted at changing the outcome. And every engineer knows this is the most powerful way to change any system, and it's used in many, many physical examples like modern-day drill bits, so you don't fracture the diamonds. But we don't see it in our medical system when it comes to humans very often, including our education system. And so how do we build closed-loop systems? One way is through video games, and that's what I really latched onto over 8 years ago. Here's a little cartoon of how that works. So this is your brain playing a video game, a closed-loop video game, because as you play, your behavior is generating performance metrics, how fast you are, how accurate you are. The game can record all of this with essentially no delay and then use it to feed back in real time an updated environment. So it could target the challenge right at that sweet spot where it's not so hard that it's frustrating, not so easy that it's boring, which also happens to be the most fun domain to play a game, sort of the flow state, what our developers would call it. And the other thing we can do is give feedback and rewards in real time. And every game developer knows this is how you create deep immersion and engagement in that experience, which we think is critical to change the brain, right? The brain has plasticity, but also has homeostasis, and so you have to apply continuous pressure to it. It's also the opportunity for other technologies like motion capture and physiological devices, both of which are consumer available, so that you can capture richer information about yourself in the moment and feed that into the software. Then, with all the advances that we're seeing now in augmented reality and virtual reality, we could create an even more real-world immersive experience. This is an amazing opportunity to wrap all of this together with machine learning algorithms, so you have an AI that creates a truly integrated multimodal closed-loop system. This does not exist. This is a vision of the future, but not the distant future. All of these pieces are starting to come together, and I believe this is how we'll use technology to enhance our cognition. So to make this a little less abstract, I'll tell you my first journey with this started 8 years ago when I came up with this idea of building a closed-loop video game to improve cognitive control abilities in older adults. For many years, I've been studying aging in the brain, and we know that these abilities decline as we get older. And so just quite quickly, how you play NeuroRacers, you navigate a car on a road, trying to maintain your position, going left, right, pushing to go up the hills, very attentionally demanding. And at the same time, you have these signs that pop up, green signs, which you have to press the button to as rapidly and accurately as you can, but not red, green pentagons, red circles. And essentially what's going on there, we have two independent adaptive algorithms that are challenging you to do both tasks at the same time. Now, if you were to play NeuroRacer, what you would do, whether you're aware of it or not, was trade off between these tasks. It's very hard to bring your attention to both of them. So that is not what we wanted our players to do. We want them to wrap their heads around trying to do them both at the same time, because we thought that would lead to transfer outside of the challenge of multitasking into the abilities of attention and working memory, which we learn are mechanistically related through common networks in the prefrontal cortex. How do we get that to happen? We just simply tether across those two tasks with a reward cycle. So in NeuroRacer, you do not level up unless you get better on both tasks after each 3-minute run. And one thing we learned is that everyone, including 80-year-olds, want to level up in video games. It's just an innate part of being a human. So just one quick data slide. What you're looking at here is multitasking performance on NeuroRacer. The red line is perfect performance. That means that you do that assigned task just as well when you do it alone compared to driving at the same time. And on the x-axis, we have decades of life starting at 20-year-olds. And you could see that 20-year-olds, despite certainly those in San Francisco believing that they are multitasking masters, they suffer a 27% decrement when they multitask in NeuroRacer. The question was, what happens over the course of the lifespan? Do you just maintain this ability just to suffer one tragic year when you're 69, or do you suffer every tragic year of your life, which is what we found? So this ability to multitask on the game declines linearly as we get older. We are really interested not just in the ability to use a video game as a sensitive diagnostic tool, which we're able to show here, is what happens after you play NeuroRacer as an older adult for a month. 1 hour a day, 3 days a week for 4 weeks, 12 hours of gameplay. And what we find is a dramatic improvement in their ability to play NeuroRacer. We recorded brain activity during gameplay and showed that was caused by a more rapid, efficient engagement of the prefrontal cortex and its networks with the rest of the brain. But we also found that we improved their attention and their working memory ability on completely different tasks that we did before and after, that elusive transfer effect that we were able to achieve. We published this at the end of 2013 in this journal, which is sort of, as a scientist, as good as it gets, and could have been the end of this story. But what we wanted to do was really, and my intentions all along, were to not have it live and die as a scientific academic exercise, but really get out of the lab into people's lives. And that started my journey into figuring out this sort of delicate balance between academics and industry. The first thing we did was file a patent, not the game itself, but the engine of the game, the methodology of how we challenge it. That was 6 years ago, and just several weeks ago, the patent was finally approved. So 6 years to get a patent approved here in the software domain. So it's exciting, US and Japan. And so now we go about, how do we get this into people's lives? We learned that we could not create a scalable product with inside an academic laboratory at UCSF. And this is where we started a company. You'll hear from PureTech Ventures that helped launch this, Eddie Martucci, our co-founder, as well as co-founders in the video game domain. We're going to be talking a lot about Akill, so I just want to give a wide view of what the goals are, is really to take that technology as a first pass and bring it into a development setting where we create a much higher level experience. Art, music, story, reward, all critical features if you want to have a video game and you want people to play it, especially young kids if it doesn't have violence in it. And so that is effort, a lot of effort focused on one experience to be at a high enough level. Then what do we do with it? Do we take it and put it out there and make it available, which is certainly one pathway. And we've gone sort of an unusual route, and we'll talk about that in detail in a little bit, of taking this game through the highest level of regulatory approval, both as a diagnostics and its therapeutic potential to improve these abilities in the many populations that suffer deficits in attention and working memory and cognitive control in general. Where we'll spend some time talking is our probably most exciting moment now, is that we just completed a study of pediatric ADHD, which is a phase 3 registration trial. I know this audience is well familiar with that. That study is completed. The data is blinded, being analyzed, probably the most frustrating time of my life right now. But what we will be looking at, hopefully if we hit the milestones and we could see the ability to have an impact, is the first FDA-approved non-drug treatment for ADHD and probably the first prescribable video game. So we're excited about that. I mean, it's a concept of, we have pharmaceutical medicines that deliver molecules. This would be a digital medicine to deliver experiences. And thinking about how they interact is something that hopefully will keep your minds busy over the next couple of days. Meanwhile, no one in my laboratory wanted to go about the standard cognitive neuroscience research that we started. They were really fascinated with this idea of translational neuroscience. How do we bridge this gap between technology and neuroscience? And I have very limited time with you, so I don't have the opportunity to go through each of the projects that we're creating. But over the last 4 years, our publication record has definitely slowed down as we started building new closed-loop experiences. So body-brain trainer, engage, rhythmicity, virtual attention, labyrinth, Metatrain. All of these are closed-loop video games that we built in-house and with certain collaborative partners in the video game world. All have art, music, and story, and rewards as core elements, and they each target different aspects of how cognition really is driven. They also use new technologies. So, for example, Body-Brain Trainer challenges both cognition, but also the physical body. And there we record heart rate. So when you're playing Body-Brain Trainer up on the top of the screen, as you are being cognitive challenged, you respond with motion capture recordings using a Kinect. We also record your heart rate during Body-Brain Trainer. So if your heart rate is too low based on a goal set by a VO2 max done beforehand, the game knows this in real time and just increases the amplitude of your movements, driving your heart rate up. If your heart rate goes too high, the game titrates it back. So that's an example of using physiological recordings to drive a closed loop in the physical fitness domain at the same time that we're driving the cognitive performance challenges based on your performance in that domain. And so there we have an integration where we think that the outcome will be greater than playing this game sitting on your butt with an iPad. And that's something that we're now exploring in a research study. We also, you can see, we have several experiments with virtual reality. Right now, this is a game over here called Labyrinth that's still in development, where you put on a virtual reality headset and you navigate a 3D environment on an omnidirectional treadmill called the Virtuix Omni. The hypothesis is that since our memory systems, in the most ancient way, really developed for spatial navigation, if we challenge it at a high enough level in a closed-loop environment, we will drive improvements in memory outside of spatial navigation. Still a hypothesis. Although we're really excited about each of these games and we pit them against a placebo control in research studies, we could talk about more of that methodology, where I think the biggest advance will happen is over the next 5 years, even 10 years, as we look at how these games come together, something I call Neuro Crossfit training. That is the future, not to create silos around each of them, but to have them all work together to drive each person on an individual basis. We're now doing very, very deep research studies into figuring out how these games work. So if you were going to be a participant in our study, you get MRI, structural and functional EEG, looking at rhythms of your brain, stress testing, sleep monitoring, blood work, looking at hormone levels, inflammatory markers, telomere length, VO2 max if we're doing the physical fitness training. Essentially anything that we think could improve, we test before and after, and we do it in double-blinded, randomized controlled trials. So it's taken us years to help refine that methodology of how we go about validating each of these solutions as ways of improving cognition. We also have extended beyond clinical populations to looking at how these could help developing minds as a new approach to education. I just want to conclude with the most sort of futuristic thinking of what we do at Neuroscape. So video games are sort of our core, right? Because of the mechanics of the brain, of the game, we can activate neural networks in a way that we've never achieved with molecules. With the closed loop system, we could apply pressure to it over time to just use the brain's natural plasticity to change itself. But it has the opportunity to bring in other tools of neuroscience to enhance those effects. So this is what I'm just going to give a quick introduction, as you heard, about the glass brain if you have not seen it before. this is what it looks like. This is actually my glass brain. It's a combination of MRI imaging. You could see the blue cortical surface and the golden fibers, the white matter that connect different brain areas. And overlaid on top of it, actually integrated, is 64-channel wireless EEG that's showing the different rhythms of my brain while interacting with our game body brain trainer. Also, the communication between each brain area showing how coherence occurs across distant regions. And so we have this ability. This is still really at the proof of concept stage, but the idea is that we have the ability to record in as high resolution as we're capable what's happening in the brain in that moment. And this gives us this really exciting potential to ultimately close the loop. So I'm going to put everything I said together into one sort of conclusion slide. It's 2017. If you have an issue, challenge with your attention abilities, let's say, whether you're 7 or 70 years old, you will get one of these. With the main problem is that it's sort of blunt, right? It's really a bit of a sledgehammer on how it's impacting your brain. We think that there will still be great value in molecules in this domain, but at a reduced dose, where it could just act as an activator, but not the sole driving force to improve those abilities. Then you have assessment tools. I didn't have time to tell you about this, but we've also been working on very rapid assessment tools. It's known as ACE, Adaptive Cognitive Evaluation. And so we could understand and assess better the individual and what they need optimized. Then we could prescribe a game or a series of games that are targeted to that individual at that starting point. Of course, they will change with them over time as they continue to improve their abilities. Then the glass brain comes in. If we capture neural data in the moment, we could feed that into the game engine and use it to guide the challenge adaptivity and the feedback. Now the game is not just targeting the end product, the outcome, your behavior, right? Because you could each play the game and have the same response time and the same accuracy, but your limitation might be visual, yours might be motoric, yours might be some aspect of your attention. By recording brain activity and feeding that into the closed loop engine, we think we can target the challenge of this experience in a surgical way, like a gamma knife in this approach. And that's still a hypothesis, but something we're exploring now. The other thing we can do with the glass brain is to feed it to drive the stimulation parameters of a device like this. So this is known as transcranial alternating current stimulation. We had a paper several months ago showing that if you played NeuroRacer, you being a 20-year-old, for 1 hour, and we stimulated your brain with an alternating current and the theta rhythm across your prefrontal cortex, we can accelerate your learning across that 1 hour. Begging the question, can we accelerate the transfer? And so we're doing a study now to see if older adults playing NeuroRacer just for 3 hours, not 12, could get the same benefits if we stimulate their brain non-invasively and electrically. So putting this all together, we finally will wind up with something that's targeted to those networks that most need to be optimized, personalized to the individual and how they change over time, multimodal and closed-loop systems interacting together. And because we always favor consumer-facing products across all these domains, we finally wind up with diagnostics and therapeutics that are real-world and real-time, right in people's lives. So the frustration we feel as physicians to take very sparse snapshots of our patients when we see them in clinic and they're all stressed out is something we can overcome with this system as well. And so over the next 10 years, we'll look to see how these type of tools could have benefit in conjunction with our current system to help improve or at least delay the negative consequences of pathology across these domains. And now we're also excited to take this to the next level and see how the exact same technology might not just have benefit in enhancing cognition in those that are suffering deficits, but as new approaches to education and wellness to help enhance cognition for all of us.